One thing that I learned today was at this expo, you don't want to come too early if you're speaking because you talk so much and there's so much interesting people and interesting stands, and you start losing your voice. So it's been a great day so far. I hope that you've also had a great day. My name's Robert Hein. I'm originally from Chicago, and I came to Germany 25 years ago to build my first e-commerce business. So I'm back from the days before there was SaaS, before there was complexity, when if you wanted functionality, you had to build it yourself. And the world's changed a lot. And what I wanted to talk to you today about, and I call it smooth sailing in e-commerce, is how do you approach operational excellence and how can you achieve operational excellence using both technologies? Now, before I start, just a kind of a show of hands, has anyone heard of the term boat before? No. Okay. So let's start out. What exactly is boat? Boat's a new term that Gartner has brought in. And it combines a lot of different technologies that you probably maybe already are using today. So things like Zapier or things like make.com that you're using for automation and for integration. iPaaS solutions that you're using to integrate between systems. Those are all types of both technologies. But the big transformation is that it's beyond the ETL. It's beyond just taking data from one side and bringing it to another side. It's actually about getting workflow automations in place. And workflow automations are actually the key to getting scalability. So from both, it's a lot about systems, but we think that there's something else involved. It's actually around the people that are involved. So it's the human in the loop is the addition that's going on. So when we start, I want to first align on some terms and some ideas and try to get so that we're talking about the same topic. Let's start off with a task. Task is what people do. It's work being done. It's a work package, it's one person doing it. That's what everyone is working on. And automation is simply saying, I've got a machine or I've got a system that's doing that for me. And that's the simplest term. And when people think, they think automation first. I'm going to do work that I'm doing today, and I want a system to do it for me. If I have more work, I just have the system do that, and that's really, really easy. But a task is usually not alone. It lives in a process. So a process is something that connects a bunch of tasks together. And they're actually telling the task in which order, how they have to be performed. And that brings us to the next idea, which is a core element of both, which is orchestration. So if you think about you have a complex process and you have a lot of different tasks in there, how and when do you create the task? That's where orchestration comes in. Who do you assign it to? Who's doing the work? And it brings up the next question that you have is governance. Who's allowed to do something? And that is really about when a process is created and when it gets done. And monitoring that is where compliance is in place. So a lot of you are probably in industries that have regulations. How do you guarantee that you're following the rules? How do you guarantee that your employees are following the rules? That's compliance. And to bring it all together, both pulls this together. So it combines the automation abilities, the orchestration abilities into one overall process that also tells you who is doing what when. So quick show of hands. Who works in operations? Okay, so, and everyone else does it, but operations is where my heart is. And it's one of those things that I've always worked on is saying, how do I scale businesses? And scaling business is one of the core elements and one of the core challenges that are out there. And that's what we actually want to talk about today is what happens when we're pursuing scale. So one thing about operations that it's kind of like operations has to get the work done. You've got the product people that can go out, design products, buy products. You've got marketing and sales driving demand. And at the end, it's the operation guys that have to make sure that the customer satisfaction takes place. So operations is really where the business happens. And one of the things that I learned in going through e-commerce is you want to grow, you are growing, And scaling is one of the core problems that you're trying to achieve. The first question is what do we need to scale? Second question is, well, how do we scale efficiently? Because we don't want to just build structure, we want to do it in a way that's cost effective. And that's followed up with, how much do we actually need to scale? And the how much question, let me ask again, people in e-commerce, how many of you have seasonal peaks? Okay, so you know what I mean. So you might have 40% of your business in 6 weeks time frame, and you have to get your infrastructure, your people, your processes to handle that level of business. And the rest of the time, it's kind of laying flat. So some quick answers, and this is more as a framework. We're talking about the business, and this is what we're going to be continuing on, is we have infrastructure, and people is capacity. That's what we're trying to scale. At the same time, while we're trying to build up things, we want to do it as efficiently as possible. So we want to minimize what our investment is in those areas. So you want to be able to, as a percentage of sales, be spending less money on your people and on your infrastructure. And really interesting, how many people here work with outsourcers? Okay, number of hands. Outsourcing is saying, well, that's not my problem anymore. If there's a peak, I don't have to worry about it. That's why I get an outsourcer. So outsourcing is also a way of achieving scale. But the real thing is, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is efficiency. And what we want to achieve is efficiency. So when you think about efficiency, you're thinking about automation. You have people doing work, you don't want them to do the work anymore. Or you have a certain team, you don't want to have to scale the team when you're scaling your business. So you think about automation. And when you think about automation, you're probably thinking about that in terms of the systems where that automation takes place. So you're thinking about, oh, okay, there's a function somewhere. If I'm sending an email, I can have something send that email for me. You're thinking about it in context of systems. And automation is exactly that. It's a function of a system that's there. But what happens if you don't have that function? What happens if you can't deal with it? Another show of hands. Who uses an ERP system? Okay, I'm an ERP system guy myself because when I built my first e-commerce business, there was no SaaS. And we had to build everything ourselves. But nowadays, there's the alternative of saying, I can just connect a bunch of SaaS apps. So how many of you are using SaaS applications to run your business? Okay, so it's about even. And what's really interesting is that if I have an ERP-centric, so I'm trying to get my business process living in an ERP, is a very different problem if I have SaaS world and I'm trying to get my business process living there. So when we're thinking about automation and we're thinking about trying to find that new kind of technology, what we want to do, that new function, if I start with an ERP-centric, I ask myself, well, does my ERP support this function? And if not, do I find a consultant who can program it for me because I try to get everything into my ERP system? Kind of the old way of thinking about things. In the SaaS-centric world, you're actually looking at it differently. You're saying, is there a system out there that has exactly the function that I need? It doesn't even have to be implementing all of the functions. I don't need a best-of-breed system. I need a best-of-breed function, which is very different. And the question that is asked then is saying, well, can I integrate it into my existing SaaS landscape? So the integration, the ability for the applications to talk with one another, that's where the automation takes place. That becomes primary. But I'll look at a huge amount of different SaaS applications and find exactly the function that I need. I like to call it old world and new world. But if we say that SaaS is the new ERP and the direction is going that way, integration becomes a real challenge. And if I want to automate, if I want to scale, I have to find a solution for doing that. Another show of hands, Zapier and Make. Well, even more. So Zapier and Make, that's both. So they're both technologies, and they're really about saying, okay, I'm going to automate something. Now, from those people who just showed Zapier and Make, how many use it within your own organizations? Okay? And how many of them use it yourselves? Okay, if you look around, those are the people that you actually want to talk to figure out if it's good or bad. So Make has its advantages, its disadvantages, but talk with the people who do that. What it is, though, is that's the glue. So if you're in a multi-SaaS environment, you're leveraging both technologies to try to integrate and create a virtual process around it. And it's just about the automations. And generally, you're using Make and Zapier to move data from one side to the other side. I have a new order coming in, and I want to pass that information to my marketing platform for email marketing. That's changing, though, and that's evolving because I want to think about it in trigger and action. So the question that I ask, is it that simple? I just get a new SaaS application, I use a little bit of both technology to glue it together, and then I've got my new world. And then I can automate. I don't think it is that simple. I think actually it's something very different. Now, when I think about efficiency, I think about orchestration. And the way that I like to approach this is saying, what is inefficient, rather than saying what can be automated. And the one element that I found that is inefficient are the things that live outside of a system. It's the things you don't have a system for. It's a thing you don't have a process defined for. Those are the things that kind of explode when you grow. It's the things that are the human steps in between what's being done in a process. So if you think about efficiency only as automation, you're missing out on the areas where you can really gain the most benefit, is thinking about where does inefficiency occur? And that's where orchestration comes in. Firefighting is a term that everyone I know that has built an e-commerce business knows. And it usually comes when more business is happening than you expect, or something new happens. But what is firefighting? It's a situation that you don't have a process or a system for. It's when things aren't working. It's when things are breaking. And that actually, when you have firefighting, you know that there's an orchestration problem. When I think about firefighting, I kind of classify it into 3 different areas. And the first one is bottlenecks. Bottlenecks, there's one thing about automation saying, work that someone is doing, I can automate it and I can replace with something automatic. But that's not when a fire occurs. A fire occurs when the work is between 2 people. And the work between the 2 people and the orchestration between those 2 people aren't working. And I can't just throw people on it, and I can't just throw a bot on it, because it's actually the interaction between people that is breaking and causing bottlenecks. Second aspect is quality gaps. A lot of fires occur because there's a fuck up. And where do they come from? People improvising, so maybe saying, oh, I've got so much to do, so I'll kind of do a shortcut because I know the process, but I can do this quicker if I do this way, so they're not following the rules. Maybe in a growth environment, you have to hire a lot of people. Maybe you've got employees churning through. You have to train them. They have to somehow learn what the process is because the process doesn't exist anywhere. Human error always happens. What we underestimate is the amount of miscommunication and lack of information that people are doing when they're doing their work, because it's just transferred. It doesn't have a home of where to live. But there's a third aspect where orchestration is missing that's really, really important, and I call it chaos. And chaos is a situation when something happens that you just have never seen before. And that's really common. We have a world that's changing so fast that new things coming up all the time is a commonality. And when that happens, you can't have a system in place, and you have chaos. And that fires break out. I mean, that happens. So we take a second and talk about quality gaps. One of the things that a lot of people talk about is ISO 9001, kind of this big certificate that you can do in quality, and you focus, and what is it? It's a document. And it's a document that says all of these processes that are done, and everything's nice and documented. It's usually, a huge amount of shelf space. It gets measured by how heavy it is. But it doesn't really ensure quality at all. It just is a document of the processes. The boat approach to that is actually creating the process that's executable and making sure that the process is followed every single time that it goes through. That's what you're using boat technologies for. So rather than just documenting and putting on the shelf and getting a certificate that's valid for 3 years and saying, look how good we are, you actually make sure that every process is being done the way that it needs to be done. When tackling the chaos, one thing that I always ask is, how do you do that today? And they say, oh, we have this Excel sheet, or we have this Google sheet, and when this happens, we just kind of type in a line, and then there's another team that also has access to the file, and then they're looking in. If they see a new line, then they're adding 3 fields at the end and are kind of doing the status on there. That is not orchestration. That's actually saying that will break, and it's going to break in a bad way because it doesn't scale. And there's a lack of system, there's a lack of process. So just a kind of, do you guys know Excel hacks? Do you have Google Sheet hacks in your organizations today? I'm pretty sure that everyone does. That's dangerous. That's something that we want to avoid. One more show of hands. Who had a firefight? Who had to put out fires the last 3 months? Hey, come on. So probably more than that. But it is a very, very common problem. I want to go through one more type of orchestration topic where I think everyone will be able to reflect and understand where the challenges are. And I call it pseudo-orchestration. So one of the things that I hear a lot is saying, well, describe the process to me. And they say, well, when this problem comes up, we send an email to these 5 people and they somehow take care of it. And I call that orchestration by email. And I say, well, how do you know if it's done? We don't. And if it's really, really important, well, then we send an email again to the 5 people and we hope that they answer and tell us when it's done. Orchestration by email is a fallacy. It's pseudo-orchestration. That doesn't help you and it doesn't bring you further. So when thinking about boat and implementing boat, we have a way of methodology around that. And the first step that we do is we say we create the digital twin. And what's a digital twin? So a digital twin is when you really start off with the first step and you go through all the work that's being done, step by step, but you're capturing some important information behind it. Who's doing it? Which information is necessary? Where's that information coming from that they're using? And of course, what happens next? And this is not put into a document. It's not just about creating a Visio diagram. It's actually about creating an executable process that has a start and an end. And it has all of the steps that are in place. Who's doing it? What needs to be done? The rules that have to be followed, the data that's used. And that's a digital twin. When you have the digital twin, you're also encountering all of the human steps in the process. Sometimes it is, I'm checking this report, and if the report is this information, I'm doing this step. That needs to be in the digital twin. When you have that, then you can start thinking about automation, because automation happens at the single task. It's not at the process. It's not the automated workflow. It's a little step within a process that you've defined in the digital twin. So by doing that, you can actually go where the pain point is. And one of the big challenges as you go down this digitalization path is that you need buy-in from the teams. You need people to accept what you're doing. And that buy-in from the teams really comes in, you're solving their problem. You're solving a work step that they're doing in the context that they're working in, and you're automating that step first. So getting back to smooth sailing, taking away all of the rough waters, with Boat you can actually also avoid getting shipwrecked. Just remember these things. Digitalize first. If you're automating, if you have an automation first strategy, you're missing the human steps and you will not get a functioning process that you can really scale. It's always about the human in the loop and the work that they're doing. That's what you want to optimize. Processes transcend systems. It's not about getting processes into systems. It's about leveraging a system, a function where it's at, and understanding that a process is above that. Both technologies allow you to visualize and execute those processes. Get rid of the pseudo orchestration. Get rid of the email, get rid of the governance by CC. Uncover that, there's a huge amount of potential there. You strengthen your governance and your compliance the same way. You know which work is being done. You can try, it's transparent. It's also great for managing your quality topics. When you've digitalized first, then automate, and only then automate. By doing it by step, you can automate each step with a tool that's fitting for that step. You're not looking for a tool where you automate everything with. It's really just about the problem you're trying to solve in that step. You're creating context, which means that you actually have the information that's needed for the step already in your digital twin process. And finally, you get to the point that your process can be fully automated, and you have then automated workflows. But that's the only way that you can get to that point. So that's how you can get smooth sailing with both technologies. Feel free to reach out to me if you've got challenges in scaling and you'd like to learn more. I'd gladly help. And I'll take any questions now. And thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Robert. So who wants to start with the first question? We have a couple of minutes. Yes, over there. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Martin from Alamat CZ. Thank you for the presentation. You mentioned the tool Zapier, which can connect SaaS software. But I want to ask, when I decide to digitize some process, at first I have to think about the process and make the modeling of the process. Can you tell me some tool in which I can effectively make the process model, some diagrams, etc.?
So, yeah, thank you. There's a number of tools out there. The one that we use in our projects is called MetamorphOS. And that's actually a tool where you not only are creating your diagram, it's executable. So from that, you actually get an executable process, and then you can automate them, the individual steps at that point. So that's MetamorphOS.
Metamorphosis? No.
MetamorphOS.
MetamorphOS. Thank you very much for the question and the useful advice. Yeah, over there.
Hi, my name is Ania, and I work for a supplements startup. And at the moment, I'm doing operations, and I'm deciding whether to get an ERP system or to build all of the automations that we need with Zapier or make. So I'm in that decision process, and it really shocked me that you went more for the approach of SaaS solutions. Can you build up more upon that and what you would recommend me in this situation?
Gladly.
Thank you.
Best thing afterwards, we can talk a little bit more, but the basis is getting a way of saying, normally an ERP selection process, you're saying, I need these 5 functions, or I need these 10 functions. This is what I'm trying to do. And then you're looking at the different ERP solutions and you're saying, okay, I'm scoring them, and whichever is the best score is the ERP that I select. In a SaaS first strategy, you're saying, I want the function that I need from the best tool that I have, because the systems will talk with each other anyway. So I don't have to worry about taking something that's kind of mediocre and accepting that because I want to get all my processes into one system. It's saying, I want my individual functions that I'm using to be the best of what I need, of what fits to me. And with that, I'm going with the SaaS first. So it's really a different strategy of saying, I need everything in one system, and I want the system to drive the process, which we don't believe in. We think that that's actually obsolete already. It's more about saying, I have my process lives, my process has digital components and human components, and from that, I actually have the best functions that I need. The advantage about that is there's new SaaS applications coming out all the time. If there's something better that comes out next month, it's really easy to just switch the application because your process exists and you can just plug in that new application. So you're always keeping best of breed and you're not getting that huge customization impact on the ERP side. So I hope there's no ERP providers here, but I'd go into the discussion with them as well.
Thank you very much. But like the system limitates you, but the second solution offers you more custom tailored flexibility.
Yeah.
Did I interpret it correctly? Then thank you for the question. Yeah. More questions? Yes.
I see your point of having more flexibility, but isn't there also, I mean, when you have certain SaaS solutions, you build your business on that, you collect data, you improve, you still have this dependency, especially when you scale. So how do you see that? I mean, because you said now then there's a new, provider, you can just switch to the newest version and so on. I mean, I don't know if that's really practical, because once you have built your business on a certain, let's say, CRM, SaaS, or as an AI tool, you're learning, you're building your organization on that, and you cannot just switch the other day to the other provider.
I think that there's certain use cases. If you're training a data model, you have an AI component, there's a lock-in on that. The question is if you're using a tool or not on that side. But on a lot of elements of it, from the classic ERP perspective, am I using a standard functionality on billing, or am I using a full accounting software ERP suite where I'm automatically generating booking entries out of an order that's coming from the web shop? That's the degree on the ERP side, if I'm using individual functions or not. There will always be use cases where you're investing in a technology and you're committing to that. You won't get complete independence. But if the process that is using the technology exists, then you have the ability to switch. As soon as that process does not exist and the process is only within a system, that's where you get commitment.